Alright. Um, live, live chat there. Okay. So, alrighty. Um, okay. Let's get this going. Um, yeah, and just testing out also just testing a new thing too. I really need to, uh, edit that to get it, better, I guess. But that's whatever, I suppose. Um, so, yeah, I'm testing this thing out. Uh, I need to purchase the thing fully, but I will do that eventually. Um, so this should be exciting, I guess. Um, but yeah, so we're gonna be doing 20 true horror stories animated, obviously, as it says. And that's what is gonna be used. Um, at the moment, it's not up to the actual thing, but it will be. I will put it up shortly. Um, I'm just trying to think here. Um, I think I have everything I need, so I should now just actually start the thing. Get go to the just do it there. There we go. Um, all right. So let's just get started.
This was about a decade ago, when Halloween was still a big thing. I was trick-or-treating with my two friends. I'll call them Alex and Ben, for the sake of their privacy. This was our first year going out alone and not having Alex's parents follow us around. They were a bit controlling, and it always made the whole thing about 20 times less enjoyable. So needless to say, we were all super excited for this year. For our costumes, I dressed up as a creepy clown. Ben was a scarecrow, and Alex wore a white sheet and a pumpkin mask. I guess he was a ghost with a pumpkin head, but I genuinely don't know what he was thinking. Anyway, we started walking at 5, which was pretty late, but our town's trick-or-treat hours were until 9 p.m., so this was common around here. It was actually really fun. Being just the three of us and goofing around running door to door was a great time. But later in the night, I'd say 7:30ish, we noticed these two guys across the street from us had been near us for a while. It kind of looked like they were following us, which was strange because we were constantly turning down different roads and going to random houses. Once we noticed this, we paid more attention and made a few more turns, essentially going in a full circle. and the two guys basically made all the same turns. Still, though, it wasn't exactly easy to tell if they were truly following us.
Hold
They
up.
both
Hold up. Hey, hello? I'm streaming, so. Oh, dude. I'm streaming, so. I'm so sorry. That's okay. I, yeah. Have you eaten? Yes, I have some leftovers. This is big. Oh, a big thing. Okay, sound okay. I'm gonna interrupt you too long. Yeah, yeah. What's your chore? Let's just nail that down. We'll go with it. I appreciate it, man. Again, sorry to interrupt. That's okay. Just yeah. Also next time it's like all there and you can let me know when you alright, of course. Yeah, I will we will both keep each other up on that. And your team is like fine, so I don't really stress it. If you're on Twitch or YouTube or YouTube. Oh, actually, I'm sick. Yeah, dude. I'm long for it. Yeah, I need to get a special later on this Tuesday. Oh, dude. Right. So it's not. Yeah. You're seeing and reinforcing. Sort of, yeah. No, I actually, this is since you don't remember second person, we're all this is good. Carlos and Sony and Terry Jr. No, he was this is awesome. It's always at least one thing on your floor that I'm absolutely bad for playing. Yeah, like it's really cute, constantly. Yeah, but it's really cute. Like, you want to sit right for children. This is not letting you. No, no, no. No, no. Yeah. No. No, Jack changed that. Jack changed that. Yeah. You guys are still Actually, if not, I'm never gonna decide the phone. Alright, and it's Jack say you don't come back in until you clean this shit. We have whistling. Okay, so kind of. So we kind of need this. It feels really empty. Usually we both vacuum and with rooms in here. So looking at it right now, it's like where did everything go? Oh wait, they're out there right now. Oh. Well, I found the shovel. For the that's great. For the yeah, that's great. Why is there glue? Sick. Is that wood glue? This is wood glue. What are we, what are we trying to yeah, that exactly. English is a very difficult. I was gonna say very difficult word to say, but no, it's not. It's not. It's really the language. It's very difficult to speak. There, that's what it makes. You guys need the legs. Yes, the boy. Okay, here's something. Why are those that why yeah, they've been out for since last night. They were fucking here for tonight. Well, I don't imagine they're gonna go golfing the rest of this year. I think I know the reason why. In total, three entire. Do you ever both go at once? Well, it's usually, well, I think the tournament is, no, the number is, yeah, I think, what's the difference? Why? Okay, so sorry about that. Um, anyways, I am back. I apologize for that. Uh, um, caretaker just came over. Well, for the um, for school. But anyways, let's continue.
Went up to how any other kids, and they were wearing costumes and everything. Although they were bigger than us, for sure. Maybe even high schoolers, or older. Against our better judgment, Ben and I listened to Alex's suggestion, which was to leave the neighborhood and take a shortcut through the woods to lose them and cross over into the other neighborhood. The only reason we agreed was because the woods had a path going through it that everyone had taken a few times before. Never at night, but at least we were somewhat familiar with the trail and didn't feel like we'd get lost or anything. So we hurried to the path and started walking through the woods. We hoped the two guys didn't see us. As we walked further in, it got way darker, to the point where we could barely see ahead of us. This was well before kids were running around with cell phones, so none of us had any way to light up the path. We had to stop for a second, as it started to get really spooky and kinda dangerous, and we were trying to decide if to turn back. However, while standing there, we started to hear footsteps crunching against the gravel behind us. All we could make out was the outline of two men walking toward us before we all went running into the trees. To make things worse, Ben, who was the last to start running, swore he saw the two men chase after us as soon as we took off. So, in the panic, we got completely lost in the woods. And every time we took a break to catch our breaths, we'd only have 10 to 20 seconds before we'd hear footsteps running up behind us and have to take off running again. I think that was what really confirmed to us that not only were we being followed, but they also had to have had something really horrific in mind to be still chasing us through the woods. We must have been lost in there for over half an hour before making it to a street. None of us knew which direction to go from there, so we just guessed and happened to find ourselves in Ben's neighborhood. We went straight to his house and hunkered down inside, glued to the windows for the rest of the night. Of course, being kids, we didn't tell anyone. Alex got picked up around 10, and I spent the night at Ben's house. It's worth mentioning that in the middle of the night, sometime between 2 and 3 a.m., both of us woke up to what we thought were two sets of footsteps walking up the driveway. His room was on the first floor and right at the front of the house, so the sound was pretty clear. By the time we looked, though, we didn't see anyone. Could have been nothing, but both of us having woken up to it makes me unsure. After that, nothing else happened. Every other Halloween was completely normal, but we always got that little adrenaline spike with that nervous feeling that we were being followed.
Okay. Um, I will say that is really creepy. Um, huh, yeah, that was really creepy. But, oh well, let's let's continue. And
This was 5 years ago on Halloween night. I was lucky enough at the time to have a nice house in one of the larger neighborhoods. Large in terms of a lot of houses, not necessarily. Kids would be flooding the streets every Halloween, so usually from 3 to 7, I'd be handing out candy full time. Now, nothing ever interesting ever really happened. It would always be the same interactions. Kids would come up and ring the doorbell, say trick or treat, get their candy, and leave. But toward the end of the night, the doorbell rang, and I answered the door to a single girl standing on my porch. She was alone, but there was a guy on the sidewalk. I assumed her parent, watching her. The girl looked a bit strange, though. She had on a costume of, I guess, a dead bride, sort of a ripped up white wedding dress, but she also had white face paint covering her entire face, and oddly, she looked older. Not really like a kid, the more I looked at her. But of course, with the face paint, I thought it might have just made me have trouble determining her age. She didn't smile or say anything, and just held out a small bag. I put a handful of candy in it, and as soon as I did, she turned and quickly walked away. The man walked next to her, and they were talking, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. They definitely knew each other though, and although the whole thing was a bit weird, I wasn't worried about it. I looked around to check if any other kids were coming by, but not seeing anyone, I closed the door. Rest of the night was slow. I had a few more kids come up to the door, but it was mostly over. I moved the candy away from the door and stayed up late, talking on the phone with some friends and cleaning up around the house. Honestly, I think I was up until 1 a.m. When I realized how late it was, I turned off all the lights and went upstairs to shower before bed. I was in there for maybe 15 minutes before I got out and happened to check my phone and noticed an alert from my doorbell camera. It was from 10 minutes ago, basically right after I got in the shower. Sometimes this happens and it was just a false alarm, but when I checked it, I immediately felt my stomach drop. For just a moment in the corner of the video, that same girl with the white wedding dress costume showed up, but immediately backed away, kinda like they remembered there was a camera and was trying to stay out of view. I quickly got dressed and hurried downstairs and looked outside. It was quiet, and nobody was on the porch. My heart started racing. This couldn't be a coincidence. But then I heard something behind me. I turned and stared down the shadow-filled hallway. I could hear whispers coming from the other end of the home. Two people talking back and forth. I instantly turned around and all the way to the other end of the neighborhood. I then called the police and waited anxiously. Not even a minute later, I got another notification from the doorbell app. My face went pale. The recording showed the girl and the man running out of my house. I gave the police the video evidence, and they did what they could. They found that they'd likely picked the lock on the side entrance door that led inside my garage, which they were then able to get inside the house from. But they never found them, or even identified them. Interestingly, other neighbors reported having similar weird encounters with the two, but they only broke into my house. So the two were probably going around and trying to find someone who they thought would be most vulnerable. Just a theory though. Even to this day, no further information has come out, and the two haven't been seen since.
Okay. Now that is something that I don't. Why? Well, I mean, I know why, but well, no, I don't know why. Well, yes, I do because they said their theory of why. But if that happened to me, I'd be updating my locks and getting more security measures for that. There's no way I would stay at that house without getting more security measures just in case. Uh, yeah, no, not gonna happen. Okay, the next one.
I was 15 and felt too old this year to be going around in a costume trick-or-treating on Halloween. Instead, I hung out with my friend and just hanging out in my room and being bored. It felt like we should be doing something, because it was Halloween. Not only that, but my parents were gone for a work party in the city, so we had the whole house to ourselves for the rest of the night. After a while, we couldn't decide on anything cool, so we did the most unoriginal thing and went to the basement to watch a Halloween/horror movie. We found something decent and turned it on, then turned off all the lights. The basement was already kind of a spooky place in the house, being unfinished and with boxes and random stuff stored all around. Basically, there was just a couch right in the middle and a small TV in front of it. It was usually where my dad went to have a couple beers and stay up late while everyone else was sleeping. Anyway, we watched the movie for a while, getting past the introduction and whatever. But then we heard a thump. Both of us looked at each other, then paused the movie. The house was quiet. I thought it might have actually been from the movie, so I rewinded it and played it back, but there wasn't anything even close to what we heard. From the basement, everything upstairs sounded muffled, but we were sure it had to be from the floor above us. I got up, and Aiden followed as I went to the bottom of the stairs and listened again. Very quietly, we could hear more thumps. They were softer, moving around the upper floor. Me and Aiden just looked at each other in fear, not moving or talking, knowing exactly what the thumps sounded like. It was like someone quietly walking around upstairs. Then, suddenly, a voice called out. "Aiden! Aiden!" He called out Aiden's name several times. His voice was deep, and Aiden clearly had no idea who it was. And even if he did, they'd still broken into my house while my parents were away. We quickly found a place to hide. It was a very small closet in the corner of the basement. Pretty sure it was the utility closet, with the water heater and stuff. And only seconds later, the basement door creaked open.
Good God.
We could see through the small cracks in the closet. The upstairs lights shined down the stairs into the dark basement, and after a pause, the man started walking down. He walked slowly, getting to the bottom and pausing to look around, then moving into the middle of the basement. When he noticed the TV was on, he stared at it, then called out Aiden's name again. "Aiden!" He began looking behind some of the boxes, through it for a minute. I knew that box had old photo albums and family gifts and stuff, so it was super creepy to watch this guy just looking through them. But after being down there for 5-ish minutes, he headed back upstairs. We heard his footsteps wander the upper halls for a while. Then it went quiet. After waiting in the closet for what felt like a whole hour, I finally snuck out, got my phone, and called for help. I'd waited so long, though, that the guy was already gone, and with how dark the basement was, we couldn't see any features of the guy to identify him with. Clearly, though, he knew who Aiden was, and found out he'd be alone at my place for the night, and was definitely stalking him, probably to kidnap him, and maybe even me too. It was an extremely disturbing situation, and I still talk to Aiden to this day, but nothing has ever come from it. We never saw that guy ever again.
Okay, now what the fuck? That's just really creepy. Um, well, hate to be them, that's for sure. Mm, I don't know. Uh, yeah, I definitely hate to be them. Okay, whatever.
This happened a few years ago on Halloween. I was still a kid, not super young, but getting to the point where some people in my age group would start deciding to skip out on trick or treating. Most of my friends this year chose not to go, but me and my best friend Jason were still excited for it. For me, it wasn't even the act of trick or treating that made it fun, but it was just going around the neighborhoods and enjoying the holiday, hanging with friends, and doing something you don't always get to do. And of course, at the end of the night, you'd have a ton of candy that would last for weeks. Jason lived in a slightly larger neighborhood than me, so after school, I headed right to his house so we could start from there. Admittedly, we both wore the most generic, boring costumes we could find, because neither of us wanted to look like tryhards and go all out on our costumes. Anyway, we started trick or treating.
Hold on. Let me, real quick turn off my overhead light so it's a little more serious for me. Hold on a second. Alrighty, let's get started again.
Around 4. It all started out just as you'd expect. We went door to door and got as much candy as possible and had fun running around the neighborhood and looking at all the cool decorations. By 6:30, we'd made it well past the neighborhood and maybe 2 or 3 further down to a place we hadn't really been to before. It looked like every other area around here, except instead of leading to another neighborhood, at the end there was a road going into the forest,
Oh,
and
wow.
along that road were these massive houses. At least twice as big as the ones we were walking around, but probably even bigger. They looked like mansions tucked away in the trees along the road. Both of us knew we had to see what they were handing out. We didn't even finish going up to the rest of the houses where we were at, and just went straight for the bigger ones. Stupidly, we didn't even realize the sun was going down, and
Okay,
honestly,
yeah,
we
that is
didn't know where
stupid.
we were before, so going into this even more unknown forest neighborhood was not a good idea. We went up to the first house. It had a long driveway, and the whole mansion only had a single porch light on. I rang the doorbell, but nobody answered. After a minute of waiting, we left and went to the next one. Pretty much right away, we noticed how quiet it was out there. Just the crickets chirping in the trees. No other kids or parents were walking around or trick or treating over here. Somehow, we still didn't get the hint and kept going deeper in, approaching
Yeah,
every house along the
why?
way. But none of them answered. I think we knocked on 8 to 10 houses before we saw an orange glow in the woods and noticed it was a house that finally had some Halloween decorations outside.
Ooh,
It
that's
looked the same as
spooky
all
as
the
hell.
others, being old and extremely large, but it had lights and yard decor all around it, sort of in an older style that matched the house. But we figured they surely were handing out candy if they went through all the work of setting this up. We couldn't help but get excited as we hurried up the driveway and went to knock on the large wooden door. But once we were up on the porch, we saw the door was already open. The inside of the home was very dark, and everything looked outdated. Still, I knocked on the door. It was very
That was a
quiet for a
stupid
whole
idea.
30 seconds while we waited. Felt like something was off, because if you had all the decorations and left your door open on Halloween, likely you'd be home and watching the door. It wasn't until we were just about to walk away when suddenly a man appeared
Holy
in the crack
shit.
between the open door. He was an older guy, 50s at least, with thin hair and these really open eyes. It almost didn't look natural. He smiled and said Happy Halloween, and said he had candy just inside for us. There was an awkward pause for a few seconds, because we thought he was going to go back to grab the bowl, but instead he just stepped aside, as if inviting us
No.
in.
Do not go in
Neither
there.
me or Jason moved. Come on in. It's just down the hallway here. The bowl's too heavy for an old man like me to be walking around with. He opened the door wider and lifted his hand up toward the hallway, again wanting to welcome us inside his home. But common instinct, mixed with the eerie darkness that covered most of his home, we knew this wasn't worth the risk.
Yeah, it's not.
Jason tried saying
Leave.
some sort of excuse, but stumbled over his words and didn't even get a coherent sentence out before I nudged him, signaling to just leave. We both hurriedly walked away, not even looking back to see the man's reaction. We still didn't know whether or not that man had bad intentions or anything, but we just wanted to be safe and not end up on the news as the kids who willingly went inside some crazy guy's home on Halloween. Being more
You would
focused
have
on just
been.
getting away, though, we unconsciously just kept going down the road the way we were before, heading deeper into this strange neighborhood. We skipped the next several houses, though, still talking about what that strange interaction was, and ultimately decided we should get out of this neighborhood and head back to one of the regular ones. Because we were already so far in, though, we thought continuing down would have to lead to a road at some point. We walked
Mm,
for 15 minutes, not stopping at a single house. The
yeah,
woods were just as quiet, and now with the sun fully down, it was extremely dark. Nobody else was out there. And then we saw something up ahead. Along the forested road, there was a car, parked right on the edge.
that's
It
not
was
creepy
so
at
dark
all.
outside, though, and its lights were off, so by the time we saw it or so feet from passing it, it was very old, and with none of its lights on, it nearly resembled an abandoned car. Jason and I walked past it nervously, confused and curious about it, but sticking to the opposite side of the road. I couldn't
That's a
see
smart
anything
move.
through the front windshield, with it parked perfectly in the shadows. But as we passed right next to it, and I looked into the side window, I just caught a glimpse of a person sitting in the driver's seat. From that glimpse, I instantly recognized the wide open, disturbing eyes he had. I told Jason to run, and we both booked it down the road. Almost right when we
Smart.
did, the headlights on the
Oh
car turned
god.
on. We just kept running though, and got super lucky that only a minute down the road was an intersection, leading to a normal neighborhood. We didn't see the car follow us, but maybe us running away made him know that we were aware of everything, and kept him from trying anything. We basically went right back to Jason's house and never told anyone about it, not even the rest of our friend group. That was our last year ever going out trick-or-treating for Halloween.
Yeah. No. That's, I'm not, I would never, well, I don't go trick-or-treating anymore, so we're good. Okay, let's go.
My very first car was a dark green 2000 Volkswagen. It was the most basic of basics when it came to cars. No options whatsoever except for an automatic transmission. It was $300. Slow, dumpy, had no right headlight, drove straight with the steering wheel practically sideways, and let out a cloud of white smoke when started. Every stereotype of a poor high schooler's car you can think of. My car was no exception. Despite it being a piece of German crap, I loved that. I named it Thunder Bunny. But Volkswagens from that generation, my model especially, had a pretty bad flaw in the automatic transmission. I'm not sure exactly what causes it, but essentially, the transmissions gradually get worse and worse until the car will not shift into third gear. And there's not a thing you can do from there. So, a couple of weeks after Halloween 2019, I was going about 30 miles per hour when the engine suddenly roared and the car wouldn't speed up. I feared the worst, and my fears were justified. My dad, a mechanic, didn't even have hope for my car. She was gone already, and so much to my dismay, we started looking for a new car. It only took about a month for us to find it. A dark green 1999 Volkswagen. Exactly like my old car, in absolutely everything. She was faster, had heated leather seats, auto wind, everything. All
That's
except for
a
an automatic
coincidence.
transmission. I knew how to drive manual, so it was perfect. I had a new baby from the crackhead neighbor girl to Scarlett Johansson. At least in my eyes. I loved that car even harder. Gave it another nickname and was happy. Okay, I'm about to get to the story, but I have a few more quick things to explain. You can skip this if you want, but it's important, but I guess not vital to the story. First, for people that might not know, when you have a manual car, you cannot leave it in gear and take your foot off the clutch. If you do, the car will stall, which is bad, so if you do leave your car in gear, you need to turn the engine off before taking your foot off the clutch. If you don't want to turn the car off or have it turn itself off, you need to pull the handbrake or it will roll away. Guess what the only really broken thing on my car was at the point this story takes place? If you guessed the handbrake, you're right. And that was the second thing.
Wow.
No handbrake. Okay, now to the story. I started working as a pizza delivery driver in a smaller growing town in Michigan. It was good money, but once in a while I delivered to an incredibly sketchy place and I've had a few shotguns pulled on me. One night, about 2 months ago, I was delivering on a Friday. Usually Fridays are very busy, but this day was a little slow. So when a delivery came at 8:30, half an hour before we closed, I jumped on it. I realized it was 7.1 miles away, so all of the closing jobs would be done by the time I got back, and I would have been able to leave immediately. It was way out of town in a wood-surrounded neighborhood, but again, no work when I got back to the store. Seemed like a good deal to me. And I'm all about those
Jeez,
sorts of
no.
deals. So I climbed into my car and went to drive the 7.1 miles away. As I pulled up to the house, I began to get a bad feeling. The house was in a small trailer park neighborhood, next to a lake. The kind where the houses are all a good distance apart with a likely drug problem and was completely dark. No lights on inside. There was a single car in the driveway and an open window on the side of the house. I pulled in behind the car in the driveway and sat there for a moment. Something was off. By the house being completely dark, I mean there wasn't so much as a nightlight that I could see. Usually when I deliver to a dark house, there is at least a light on upstairs or something that would signal someone being awake, waiting for their pizza. But the house seemed dead. Nevertheless, I put the car in gear, turned off the engine, grabbed the small cheapest pizza we had, and got out. Without my headlights on, there was nothing. I could barely see the house. The only light was the dim moon. I walked onto the porch and passed the big open window to the front door. As I reached the front door, I saw it. The door was slightly cracked open, just enough for me to see into the void of the house. Thinking of every single horror movie I've ever seen, I said aloud, "Screw this," and hurried back to my car. I'm a tall, well-built looking guy, but despite my wide shoulders and baggy hoodie, I'm a frail thing and can hardly fight off a small dog. I got into my car and turned on the engine. My headlights illuminated the house, and almost simultaneously, the living room light behind the big open window lit up, and a single guy looked out and walked to the front door. I cursed to myself and weighed my options. If I went up to the door, I could die. If I noped out of there, I would 110% be fired. That meant no new car parts, no gas money, no cute dates with my girl, just sitting at home doing virtual schoolwork. It was a stupid choice, I know, but I grabbed the pizza and opened the door. Making a choice I'm damn glad I made. I took the car out of gear and climbed out. Mostly so my engine would still be running so that if I needed to, I could run back and immediately take off. I walked to the door where the man had opened it the rest of the way. As I got closer, I got a good look at him. I'm not one to judge a person based on their physical appearance, but this guy's head was cleanly shaven and was covered in tattoos. He was wearing a pair of gray jeans and a white tank top. He had a scowl on his face and was staring me dead in the eyes. I looked past him for a moment into the house, which was completely empty. As I got close enough that I started opening the pizza bag, he started to reach around his waist. I stopped. He was staring at me with the most evil grin I've ever seen. I knew in that moment that I was about to die. I had always heard your life seems to flash before your eyes. I thought about my girl, that she wouldn't know what happened. My work would stop delivering upon my disappearance, assuming that my body wasn't ever found. My dad would regret telling me he was happy for me landing this job. That's when I heard it. That distinct sound of gravel under tires. My only pathetically small chance of escape was rolling away. I didn't even look back at the car to know that. I just stared at the man and was about to say, "Screw you," when he looked back at my car. I heard the sound of the car rolling. It was getting closer. The guy's eyes went from the driveway to behind me. I finally looked over my shoulder. My car had rolled backwards and had come to a smooth stop near the mailbox of the house. I looked back at the guy, who had a nervous look. He looked back at me and scowled again and took his hand from around his waist. He reached into his front pocket and took out $12 and handed it to me. Gave him the pizza and watched him slam the door shut. I ran back to my car and practically tore the door off trying to get in. I looked back at the house and the man was standing in front of the window, staring out at me. You better believe I nearly spun the tires on my way out of there. I kept glancing at my mirrors until I started driving under streetlights. It was easily the scariest moment I've ever had.
Yeah,
As soon
I
as I got back
agree.
to the store, I told my boss about it and she called the police. We never heard anything about it. I assumed they went to the house and only found a small cheese pizza. I started carrying a knife on me at all times, and my boss is considering getting trackers for our
Smart.
pizza bags. Only recently did I realize this is a sort of butterfly effect. I thought it was the worst thing ever that my transmission went out, and I cursed Volkswagen for designing such a terrible automatic transmission. But if that transmission was still working, then I would have still had that car when this happened. I would have put the car in park, and it would have sat there while whatever would have happened to me happened. I have zero doubts in my mind that the man was planning on murdering me. So, shitty German engineering saved me from getting murdered.
That's something. Sweet. Volkswagen. Gotta love it.
This happened during the last week of October, leading up to Halloween. I lived in a quaint, small house in a very standard suburban town. I definitely enjoyed the holiday, don't get me wrong, but setting up outdoor decorations was never really my thing. A few years ago, my sister gifted me a small ghost decoration, so I just set that up in my front yard and call it a day. But a week before Halloween, I got a knock at the front door. It was my day off, so I was home to answer it. I didn't recognize the man. He was around 40, with stubble and short brown hair, and wearing a thick, puffy jacket. He had a wide smile as he said he was just wanting to tell me how much he loved my Halloween decorations. I didn't really know how to respond. Again, I
Wow.
only had that single, small ghost in my front yard. It wasn't even that cool or unique. Literally just a sheet of wood with a ghost painted on the front. I said thanks, and the guy kept his smile as he walked away. I found it really weird, but not concerning. Probably just a really social person. Maybe too social, to be honest. However, only a couple days later, he came back. This time, I'd gotten home from work at 7, and without even getting a chance to change out of my work uniform, he knocked on my door.
Hold on a second. Hello. Hey. I on your bed. What were you guys up to? Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I'm still alive. So there's that. Um, no, I'm still live streaming. Okay, that's fine. I mean, you'll still be able to see it tomorrow when even if the stream is done. All right. Well, talk to you tomorrow, then. Bye. Alrighty. Sorry about that. Let's continue.
I was actually very creeped out when I saw it was him again, and the conversation only made it a little more concerning. He again complimented the ghost in my yard, but instead of leaving the conversation at that, he then tried to start up small talk. I gave very uninterested one-word answers, making it clear I was not interested in whatever the hell he was trying to get at. I mean, at this point, it was just creepy. Eventually, I told him I was busy, and even then, he still tried to keep me at the door, which forced me to just close the door in his face. He stayed there for 20 seconds, looking like he was contemplating knocking on the door again, but thankfully he chose otherwise and just walked away.
God,
Things were
that's
starting to get
creepy.
real creepy with this guy, but I hoped that was the end of it. Several days went by. There were no other occurrences with the man, so it had mostly fled my mind. It was Halloween night, and I'd been lucky enough to get out of work early, so I'd be home to hand out candy. I made a very early dinner and spent the whole night going back and forth from the TV and the front door. Around 7, most of the crowds had died out, and it was just a few groups of kids coming by every once in a while. But when I opened the door to hand out candy to a few kids, I happened to notice something across from my house. I recognized the thick, puffy jacket and knew it was the same sidewalk, looking almost like he was watching me or my house. But I couldn't tell. I out candy to the kids and watched them leave, making sure the guy wasn't following them or anything. Maybe I was oversuspicious, but the man ended up walking the opposite way, so I closed the door and tried not to worry too much. Eventually, all the kids seemed to go home, and the neighborhood streets were quiet and calm, with no kids walking around anymore. I stayed in the living room and turned on a scary movie to end off the night. I think it had to be 10 p.m. when I started it, and probably 11 or 12 when there was a sudden knock at the front door. I nearly fell off the couch by how
Jesus
much it scared
Christ.
me. I got up and cautiously looked out the door, seeing the same man standing there, and he was holding something. It was way too late for this. I immediately knew something was wrong. I didn't open the door, but he must have heard me, because he started talking. Got something for ya. Nothing special. Just wanted to give it to you to celebrate the holiday. He knocked again. Hello? It's just a gift. You'll love it. I didn't respond. I dialed 911 and stayed watching outside the door as I got cops on the way. He kept knocking and trying to give me
What
this
the
gift,
fuck?
but I couldn't see what it was. All I could see was a generic box in his hands. After a minute, he ended up leaving, taking the box with him. I gave cops all the info I had, but it wasn't enough for them to find him. And something tells me he was still nearby, watching as I talked outside with the cops, because after that night, he never came back. I don't know what that gift was, or why he was being me, but every year around Halloween, I get that sinking feeling, knowing he might come back to continue the harassment.
Okay, what is
I'd gotten home from work at 9:30 this night and made a quick bowl of cereal for dinner.
Okay, I gotta go. Uh, the security camera's picking up uh the the motion sensor is picking up the holiday lights that we have hung up inside by the door, and it just keeps sending me notifications. So I'm gonna real quick turn those off so it doesn't bug me. I'll be right back again. Okay, let's continue. Now there shouldn't be any disturbances. Let's continue.
Then went right to my room where my gaming setup was to stay up late and game with the boys. They all worked later shifts too, and I guess were running a bit late. So I sat there and finished my food, then started gaming without them while I waited for them to get online. In the middle of a game, my phone started ringing. I checked it, thinking it was one of my friends, but it was just some random number. I let it ring through, but just a few minutes later, my phone rang again, and it was the same number. I actually found this to be really weird, because usually scam calls don't call immediately, twice in a row. At least, not from the same number. I declined it, but as you could have guessed, they called back right away for a third time. Figured there was no way this was a scam, and had to be a friend using a different phone or something. I picked it up, but didn't say anything at first, waiting for them to speak. But after a few seconds of silence, I said hello. Still, no one responded. I knew it wasn't a dead line though, because I could hear wind in the background. Someone was definitely on the other end of the line. I hung up
What the
after
fuck?
15 seconds, getting kinda creeped out. A few minutes later, my buddies got online, and of course, the first thing I asked them was who was messing with me. At first, they pretended like it was them, but they were clearly just joking around, because they actually had no idea what I was talking about. They agreed it did sort of seem like a prank call, but at the same time, what kind of prank is it just to call and not say anything? We left it unknown and just started gaming. Oddly, as soon as I was on call with my buddies, the calls stopped coming in. Couple hours went by, and I'd entirely forgotten it ever even happened. At 2 a.m., we finally decided to call it for the night. We hung up the call, and I stayed at my desk for a minute, when suddenly I felt my phone vibrate. I looked over and saw it was a text. Before even unlocking my phone, I saw the text was from the same number that was calling me, and that it was a picture. I opened my phone and clicked on the image. My stomach tightened, and I could feel the blood rush from my face. It was a picture of me gaming at the desk, taken from right behind me just moments ago. I spun around and looked. No one was there. The only slight relief I got was seeing the window right there, and thinking that at least whatever the hell this picture was, it likely wasn't taken from someone inside my house.
Good
I hurried
lord.
up to the window and looked outside. There wasn't anyone in sight. I made sure the window was locked, then closed the blinds. I went back to my desk, still feeling really unsettled as I stared at the picture still up on my phone. I knew how serious and insanely creepy this was. I saved the image and quickly sent it in the group chat with my friends, praying it was somehow one of them pranking me. but none of them even joked this time. They were all telling me to get out of there or call the cops. I felt my heart start pounding as I quietly opened my bedroom door and looked out into the rest of my home. It was real quiet. For some reason, I really wanted to check the rest of the house and make sure the whole place was
That's a
secure
stupid
before
idea.
calling the police, just in case I was in immediate danger. But I barely even made it down the hallway before looking around the corner and seeing the front door. It was wide open. I don't know how, but somehow it was like I knew that someone was just around the corner from me, and I instantly sprinted back to my room and locked the door. Immediately, footsteps came from down the hallway, but he walked slowly, stepping right up to the other side of the door, and then knocked on it. I saw the door handle move, then he knocked a few more times. He never spoke a word. I started a call with the police, but this whole thing didn't last more than 30 seconds. The man behind the door suddenly backed away, and I'm assuming just left the house. A few officers came by and did their investigation, but I didn't get the answers I hoped for. The number he called and texted with was a burner phone, didn't link to a name or anything, and I never actually saw the man or had even a single hint as to who it was or why any of it happened. Even now, I can't help but get paranoid sometimes, because what's stopping him from coming back and doing the same thing again, or something even worse?
Oh, good lord.
For Halloween last year, I had plans to go to a party with a bunch of friends. It was supposed to be a house party at a mutual friend's place, but just on the morning of Halloween, the plans fell through. I'd already slept in and woken up super late, having planned to stay up all night at the party. Without it happening, I guess I just had to hang around alone at home. I spent the day as I would any other, and eventually found myself on the couch for the evening. It was well past trick-or-treat hours, and although I wasn't sleepy, I was definitely tired, just from being bored all day. I grabbed a blanket and some snacks, then turned on an old horror movie to pass the time with. The way my living room was set up, my couch was along the wall with the TV in front. To the left was the kitchen, and to the right was the front windows of my house. I almost always kept the curtains closed for privacy, especially at night. But during the movie, several times I thought I'd seen something move between the gap in the curtains. I'd turn my head and look, and there was nothing, so I'd forget about it. Next time, I actually got up to look. I fully expected not to see anything. I pushed the curtains aside and looked out the window. Right away, I saw someone outside my house. Not right out by the window, like I thought whatever I'd been seeing was. This guy was out in the street in front of my house. He was an adult for sure, maybe in his 30s, but had a dark Halloween costume on. He was just walking around aimlessly, going up to the sidewalk, then turning back around and crossing the street. The way he was acting made it look like he was drunk. I mean, I would have bet good money this guy was walking home from a Halloween party, completely hammered. I looked down at my watch, noting it was 1 a.m. He didn't look like a danger or anything, though, and I didn't think he was what I'd been seeing moving around outside my window, because he was too far away. I
That was
closed
your
the
first
curtains and went back
mistake.
to the couch to continue the movie. The curtains, even when fully closed, still had a gap between them, but I didn't see any more movement. It actually made me more curious now that I'd looked out the window. Whatever I'd been seeing had stopped. However, just 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I darted my eyes across the room and stared at the door for a moment. It had to be that drunk guy. I was almost sure of it. What the hell was he doing outside my front door? I didn't get up, hoping he'd just forget about it and leave. But then
No,
he knocked
not gonna
again.
happen.
I went over just to verify it was him. I looked out and saw that same guy with the dark costume on. But something was different. He wasn't stumbling around, or swaying, or anything like that. The man stood still, almost motionless, just staring at the door. Even through the peephole, I could see his eyes were wide open and fixed on the door handle, waiting for me to open it. I started getting really creeped out. If he were drunk, how the hell was he standing perfectly still and not fumbling around? Especially if he were as drunk as he looked just 10 minutes ago. It made me think he might not be drunk at all and might have just been some lunatic, which was way more concerning. I was really debating calling the police, but just when I was starting to think about it, the man left my doorstep and walked away. He went down the sidewalk for as long as I could see, and looked like he was done with whatever the hell he was doing.
Yeah,
I
no.
left the door and sat back down. For the next few hours, I really had nothing else worth noting. I ended up having some wine, hoping it'd make me sleepy so I could just go to bed. I knew if I even tried to sleep, though, I'd just be sitting up awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, so it wasn't worth it. But as I was sitting on the couch scrolling on my phone, I suddenly heard a tapping noise. It was from the opposite end of the house. I got up, moving a bit closer, and trying to figure out what it was, and where exactly it was coming from. It sounded like dull tapping, somewhere against the house. I moved into the hallway, and then into the family room. My eyes moved through the room, following the sound to the far window. Then I saw it. The shadow of a man, standing right behind the
Oh,
glass,
what
tapping
the
something
fuck?
against the window.
No.
It was too dark to see him clearly, or what he was holding. I just ran straight to the living room and called 911. Eerily, the man didn't stop. I could still hear the slow tapping against the window while I was on the phone. Once officers were on the way, I went back into the hallway and looked out at the window again, hoping to be able to identify if it was the same creepy guy from earlier. But he clearly saw me, because he stopped tapping, stood still for a moment, then walked away. The darkness was too much for me to make out anything, but I couldn't see how it would be anyone other than the man from before. Officers searched the area and took down notes of everything I told them. I gave a very clear description of the man that stopped by earlier. Unfortunately, they didn't find him. The only other tip came in 2 weeks later, where someone a couple streets down called the police for a very similar incident, seeing a strange man stalking their home and acting unnatural. Likely, it's the same person, but as far as what he was and possibly still is attempting to do, nobody knows. I just can't help but wonder what would have happened had I answered the door to him.
If you had answered the door, you would be in serious trouble. That's one thing that I know for a fact. Um, I know for a fact that I, there's no way I would be able to, um, handle something like that. I don't think. Well, actually, no, I would be able to handle something like that. I, I think I would be able to. I don't know. It's weird. It's creepy that from one end to the other, all of a sudden he's on the other side of the house knocking on the window. Like, I don't think I would be able to handle like that type of thing. Um, and the fact that they didn't the police couldn't find this guy either. I don't know. It's like, yeah, I, there's no way I could, um, handle something like that without going full on, get everything locked, try to figure out who this guy is. Try to see if I could get like a photo or something the of the guy or something like that. But no, that's not something I would want to deal with. Um, if I just don't, I wouldn't want to deal with some crazy guy. You know, it's not something I think I can. I don't know. I don't know. Uh, I'll be right back. I need to go to the bathroom. I will be back momentarily. Boy, that's crazy. Alrighty. Next video.
I'd gotten home from work at 9:30 this night and made a quick bowl of cereal for dinner, then went right to my room where my gaming setup was to stay up late and game with the boys. They all worked later shifts too, and I guess we're running a bit late. So
We
I
already
sat
watched
there and
this one.
finished my food, then started gaming without them while I waited for them to get
Yeah.
online. In the middle of a game, my phone started ringing. I checked it, thinking it was one of my friends, but it was just some random number. I let it ring through, but just a few minutes
So we already watched that one, so we don't need to watch it
I'm
again.
32 and live in a small home on the countryside. This night was pretty much going normally, up until just before bed. I had this day off and was home all day. I didn't notice anything unusual. Around 9 p.m., I went up to my bedroom and got ready for bed. I was on my phone watching YouTube while trying to fall asleep, when I started to hear something. I paused the video. Faintly, I could hear someone talking outside. At least two people, maybe more though, which made it all the more suspicious. And this was actually the first time I've ever had anyone trespass, at least that I know of. I mean, I lived pretty far from other houses, and there were no sidewalks or anything near my house, so anyone walking around this close had to know what they were doing. I sat up in bed and tried to listen to what the guys were saying. but it was
Yeah,
still too
okay,
faint, so I
that's
got up and
just...
went over to the window. As soon as I stepped up to it, all the voices suddenly stopped talking. A
Oh,
chill
what
ran
the
through my
fuck?
body, knowing this had to mean that whoever was out there could see me. But all I saw was darkness covering the entirety of my property. The thought of all their eyes staring up at me in the window was really unsettling. I quickly backed away. I really hoped this was all just an accident, like they somehow didn't know they happened to walk onto my property. But if that was the case, why didn't they leave when they saw my house? Why did it sound like the voices were walking up closer to the house? I waited a few minutes, then walked up to the window again. But again, I didn't see anything. I then went downstairs and up to basically every window, trying to see anything at all. It was the fear of not knowing what was going on, or where they were, that made it so unsettling. I think it was probably 30 minutes after initially hearing the men outside that I decided to risk opening the front door to get a better look and listen.
I
I
wouldn't do
turned on the
that.
light, opened the door, and stepped onto the porch. After a few seconds, I stepped a bit further from the door. I didn't hear anything but the wind and the soft sound of crickets in the distance. And past the light, it was way too dark to make out any shapes of trees or anything. But as I stood out there, an overwhelming feeling came over me. My eyes started shifting all around, and I became very paranoid. It was like I could sense multiple eyes looking at me from somewhere.
Oh, fuck
I quickly
that.
hurried back inside and locked the door. Probably just a gut feeling, but it felt like something was about to happen. I don't know what, but I didn't want to find out. Once I was inside and with all the doors locked, the feeling faded away, which made me think it really was just a feeling. I grabbed a glass of water and went back upstairs, letting myself calm down and relax before getting back in bed and trying to fall asleep. Took a while, but I did manage to. Had to have been asleep for a few hours, but I was woken up violently by a crashing sound from the hallway just outside my bedroom. I jumped out of bed, heart racing, sprinting up to the door and opening it. I looked into the hallway. There was shattered glass spread all over the floor. Someone had thrown a rock straight through the window that was on the
Oh,
back
good
hallway wall.
lord, are you kidding
I
me?
genuinely couldn't believe it and stood in
Wow.
shock for several seconds as I processed what this meant. Then I heard the voices again, multiple, all yelling commands at each other, and in between their shouting were heavy slams against the front door. The weight of it shook the whole house. Among the heavy slams, more windows were getting shattered as I went back into the bedroom and locked myself in. I dialed 911. It was while I was still on the call that I heard multiple people running into the house. Their footsteps ran through the bottom floor. I could even hear
Jesus
some of them
Christ.
laughing. The operator on the line said an officer was 5 minutes away, but knowing the group had already broken inside and could probably easily take down the bedroom door, I didn't feel safe waiting. I went up to the window and opened it. Because this place was a ranch home with sloped ceilings, this window gave access to the roof. Obviously, you weren't supposed to get onto the roof from there, as it was incredibly dangerous, but I felt like I didn't have a choice.
Yeah, you
I
don't.
crawled out and onto the roof, then closed the window and moved further up to the top. A minute later, the men started banging on the bedroom door. A couple of them yelled to open up, some even using a jokingly friendly voice. It was sickening. Then, it only took a few hits before they bashed it open. Their footsteps scattered around below me. After looking for 30 seconds, I could hear them getting frustrated. They moved through the entire upper floor, probably double-checking every room. After that, I really don't know what was going on. They remained inside the house, though, until police sirens were coming up in the distance. Then the group ran back out of the house and straight into the darkness. I stayed on the roof until officers were inside and able to help me down. I still can't believe I got away from that. A
I
whole group
cannot
aggressively
either.
breaking into my home on the countryside in the middle of the night while I was alone. I can only imagine what they were trying to do. My home was basically trashed, but nothing was really missing, which unfortunately means they definitely were looking for me. I don't know if it was me specifically, or they just happened to choose my house just because, but I don't think I'll ever know.
Holy shit.
My friend was throwing a Halloween party with her sorority, and she'd invited me and a couple of other guys. It was a low-key event. Only a couple dozen people would be there, but I preferred that type of scene, so I was excited about it. I was running about an hour late, but I was sure nobody would be there until at least an hour after it started, so I wasn't too worried. My costume was lazy, just the first thing I saw at Party City, a firefighter with a bloody axe. I called an Uber around 7 and let everyone know I was on my way. My driver pulled up in a trash Kia, missing its front bumper and windows tinted nearly pitch black. He rolled down his window and called my name. The guy was wearing sunglasses, even though it was completely dark out, and he had a nasty rash on his face. He had oily, matted hair that clung to his sweaty face. I hesitated a bit before getting in the car, but decided I was being too judgmental and got in. The ride was quiet at first, but then he asked me about my costume. I told him I was on the way to a Halloween party and had to get something last minute. He laughed this awkward, squeaky laugh and told me he'd never been to a party. He went into this monologue about how he never said more than a few words throughout high school, and that people wouldn't even look at him. He started to get mad just remembering it, and hit the steering wheel, then his forehead, while in the middle of his story. He was barely paying attention to the road, and I was sure we were going to crash. I told him it was all right and begged him to keep his eyes on the road. He managed to chill out after a bit and apologized. As we pulled up, he didn't unlock my door for a while and just stared at the house. He muttered something about missing out on life and finally unlocked my door. After I got out, he stayed parked in front of the house until I walked into the living room. The party was mellow. I started drinking immediately to get in a better mood after that guy ruined my spirits. A few drinks in and I was starting to have fun again. The girls who invited me were singing karaoke on the TV, and my friend was jamming out on the guitar. A couple of games of beer pong later, and I had all but forgotten that miserable Uber ride. That was when, around 10, I noticed someone new sitting in the living room. It was a tall, stocky man in a hoodie and a mask of Jason from Friday the 13th. I wondered who had invited him, seeing as everyone was accounted for. The guy sat in complete silence in the corner of the living room while the party went on around him. Eventually, I asked Rachel, my friend hosting the party, who he was. She looked at me, confused, and said that the guy told everyone he was invited by me. At that point, I was past confused and started to get creeped out. I walked up to where he was sitting and quietly watched the party go on around him. He didn't pay attention to me, even though I was standing over him. I went to tap him on the shoulder to get his attention, and he grabbed my arm before I could touch him and squeezed. I yelped and tugged my arm back. He let go and went back to staring at the party. I yelled at him, asking what his problem was, but he stayed completely quiet. Everyone stopped partying and was watching us. I told him to tell me who he was or get out, and he stood up, almost a head taller than me. I wasn't exactly short, but this guy was huge. There was a machete attached to his waist, which I was praying was a prop for his costume. Everyone stopped partying and was watching us. The whole party was dead silent. The guy walked to the middle of the room, put his head in his hands, and started sobbing. Some of his hair spilled out of his hood. It was familiar, black, oily, just like the Uber drivers. We all backed up, while his sobbing turned into screaming. The man grabbed the machete from his waist and pointed it at me. His voice was hard to make out through the mask, but he said something about how it wasn't supposed to be like this. He took the machete and threw it at the TV, shattering the screen, before running out of the house and down the street. Nobody chased him. We all just stood there in stunned silence. I was pumped full of adrenaline after genuinely thinking I was about to die. The first person to break the silence was Rachel, asking if she should call the cops, but there wasn't much of a point. We all left right after that, but I didn't call an Uber. I'm not sure if that guy was my driver, but I can't think of any other good explanation. He was seriously crazy, and I'm just glad nobody got hurt, but I know things could have gone much worse. So since then, I've gotten a lot more cautious about whose car I get in.
Jesus Christ.
Even though we were way too old to be trick-or-treating, my friend Jason sent our group chat a text asking if we all wanted to get together in costume and hit up a few houses for free candy. We hadn't heard from Jason in a few days, so it was a bit of a surprise. We all agreed that it could be fun, and planned to meet in one of the neighborhoods known to have the best candy, even though it was a bit remote. I was feeling lazy with my costume, so I dressed up in a black sheet and mask to go as the Scream guy. When we met up, most of my friends had similar ideas, with a Barack Obama and a Joker. The odd one out was Jason. Well, I assumed it was Jason, because he was the only one whose face I couldn't make out. Jason was wearing nothing but a black bodysuit covering everything, including his face and some torn up clothes covered in fake blood. The fact that the costume was so bad made it the most unnerving costume of any of us. We got going around the block. There was only a dozen or so houses on the entire street, so we took our time.
So I'm gonna end the video here. But good lord. That was something else entirely. Like, oy vey. I don't even know. Um, it was interesting. Also, hopefully you guys enjoyed this, avatar that I was using. I decided to change it up a bit. Um, and, yeah. But, I will try to get, the, subscription to get rid of the watermark right there that is going around on all four corners of the screen. Um, but yeah, anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to click that notification bell. And I'll see you guys in another video.